soon. All right, well, we finished up really kind of starting this idea of epistemology. And so I'm going to, some people have asked me, please give us a handout. And by the way, there are some handouts here that are the ones that we've already got in our hands. But people have asked me on numerous occasions, please give me a filled out handout, and then I'll just listen. Bless you. But, I was a professor a long time, and that's a recipe for disaster. But I don't figure y'all will be on your cell phones playing video games. So that's not the issue. But just so you know, I did a new PowerPoint, added a PowerPoint while we were eating. So it's kind of hard for me to have a set outline to hand you that's filled out already because I'm still filling it out myself as I go. So I will do my best. And one of the things I did promise that I will do is I will put up the fulfilled or the filled out outlines up on the web, or online or whatever you call it, the app, as soon as I get time. As soon as I get back from the country and whatever. Okay. All right, the word epistemology is really about the study of knowledge, and we kind of talked about that last time for just a second. Comes from two Greek words, episteme, which is knowledge, and logos, which is words. Whenever you get a good word like theology or anything that has an ology, or a lot of times that kind of, the idea is it's kind of based in the concept of words about something, and this is words about knowledge. That's really what it's talking about. And so our idea here that we're going to try to pursue, and I've got lots of angles at it, and added some more angles today, and so I may thoroughly confuse all of us, but I'm going to try to help us understand how you make a connection between knowledge and truth, and how we see that played out in terms of learning to express ourselves in the gospel and to be able to respond to people who ask questions about our faith. I hope you noticed in the scripture that I picked out for this week, this idea that this knowledge that we're dealing with is in the context of very difficult things that come around us. And so we're kind of looking at this idea of how do I get to knowledge of truth while I'm in the middle of non-truth, or I'm in the midst of a culture of non-truth. And so we're going to kind of talk about how that plays out. There is another aspect to the search for knowledge, and that is the idea that when I begin this process of knowing, I will move myself into truth. That it actually, by knowing, I will come to understand truth better. So I want to start with some things that I used to do with regard to class when I taught general philosophy. The first thing I want to share with you is about this fellow named Zhuangzi. And this is kind of just to get our minds thinking, okay? So Zhuangzi was a philosopher in ancient China who one night went to sleep and he dreamed that he was a butterfly. Okay? He dreamed that he was flying around from flower to flower, flying with the wind, being blown about by the breezes and so forth here and there. And he was just quite sure that he was a butterfly. But when he awoke, he realized that he'd just been dreaming and that he was really Zhuangzi, dreaming he was a butterfly. But then Zhuangzi asked himself the following question. Was I really Zhuangzi dreaming I was a butterfly? Or am I now finally really a butterfly dreaming that I'm Zhuangzi? I mean, I know all of you have thought this before, right? You've thought, am I dreaming now? Is this really real? there is this kind of idea within us that knowledge about reality is actually kind of difficult to put our fingers on. Now, those of you who are movie buffs, I'm sure all of you are, you probably have seen the movie Matrix, maybe? Have you seen that? And, I think I stuck one of my sheets in the middle of another sheet. That's really good. That's funny. Oh, what's the guy that wears overalls says, now that there's funny. Anyway, the Matrix has the same kind of principle, right? Neo is this young man who's got a day job working and all the time very busy. And he meets Morpheus one night, and they sit down in a comfy room with a fire, and he holds his hands out, and he's got 2 pills. And he says, you have to choose which pill you want. If you take the blue pill, you'll go back to the same life you've been living. You'll wake up as if nothing's ever happened, and you'll just go on with your life for the rest of your life. If you take the red pill, it will change your life forever. And of course, if you saw the movie, he took the red pill, and he suddenly realized that everything that he had been experiencing was a facade and not real. That he was experiencing a fake life, and the real life was very nasty and rough, and it was the underbelly of truth and reality. And so it became really something that, makes the whole movie the premise that are we really living this life that we're in, or is there something else going on that we don't really understand or know? So one of the difficulties when we want to know knowledge is that we kind of have to, I should have thrown that up there. But one of the difficulties that we have here is the difficulty between appearance and reality. How do you know what you see is appearance or just the truth as it is? How do we really come to understand these things? How do we get to the place? And these things can relate to the idea of what the substances that we have around us are. What reality do they have in our lives? A lot of times when we think of substance, like a table, we think in terms of the thing that's in front of us, but what makes it what it is the properties or qualities that are there in it. Okay? For example, the table that you have has certain properties that reside in it, and that's kind of how we feel a certain thing actually is. So how do I know what the reality is of any given substance? That reality is something that has this perceptiveness to us, but it's not necessarily what the substance actually is. So I want to kind of go through this idea here for a second and see if we can kind of follow through on this. Bertrand Russell, who was a skeptic, tried to explain how difficult it is to actually know something. When you search for certainty in things, we only can realize certain depths of certainty, and that we sometimes find that certainties are surrounded by contradictions of various types. I'm going to deal in depth with this a little bit more later, but for now, what Bertrand Russell is trying to say is that looking at any given thing, it can be seen from a perspective, and that perspective may or may not be the reality of that thing. Okay? So I'm going to see if I can help you understand what I'm talking about. The table in front of you would appear to most anyone, if you most of you have like tablecloths, so this doesn't actually go with that, but the table to many of you, if you took the tablecloth off, it would be shiny and hard, right? And in some cases white, some cases black, some cases brown. All right? So if you look at this table, you would say, okay, this table is hard, shiny, brown, white, or whatever. But the reality is that it's also what perspective you're taking when you look at that table, right? So have you ever noticed sometimes that when you walk into a room and you look and the light is coming in at a certain angle, the table that looked brown before looks white, right? Or what if you happen to be colorblind and the table that is red looks brown? Right? So the question sometimes comes, what is in fact the reality of that particular thing? What is the reality of a color as you look at something? If you look at it from a perspective, it's going to be one color. If you look at it from another perspective, it's another color. Sherry and I can attest to this experience with our very own house. Our house was originally built, and we kind of differ on this, so I need to go look, but I forgot. But it's either 83 or 86. You said 86, didn't you? Yeah, I'm right, I think, but she could be right. It's all perspective. Well, when we came to our house, first got our house, there was a door that went in the side of the house that was actually going into a refrigerator. So, in other words, they had put a refrigerator in front of a door that goes outside, which is kind of strange. And so we decided that we should actually plug up that door. So we got somebody, and they came and they did all they tore out that door, and they put in, you know what they do. I can't even tell you. Just put stuff up there, and it's there. And so they left it with a see, this is why I have to have interactive audience. Okay, they left it with the paint you put on before you put paint. What's that called? Primer. Okay, so there's primer on it, and the primer is white. Okay, our house is not white. Our house is, help me, Sherry, taupe. It's kind of grayish something, right? So it's been, how long we been there? 2 years, 3 years? Yeah, it's still there, white, in the middle of a taupe house. And luckily there's a bush in front of it. But there are many times that I say to myself, okay, I need to paint that. Okay. I didn't ask your opinion. Okay. All right. But here's the thing. If you come at 5 o'clock in the evening, our house looks green. If you come in the heat of the day, in the sun, it looks gray. And then at other times, it looks different colors. I don't know what to paint it. And I can't take the wall out to go show it to them. So, but the reality is, what is the color of that house? How can I really know? It's something that is reflected by what the perception is at any given moment. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes in trying to understand things, it becomes very difficult for us to see things. And we generally have to define it by the properties we see there. Okay? I know it's a solid wall, and it's got white on it, and I know there's gray on each side of it-ish, but somewhere in there is a paint that works. But I'm not sure what that paint is. Russell went on to say that can be true of the table itself. If you've ever looked at, and I don't know that anybody has, including myself, but if you've ever looked at a table, a solid table in an electron microscope, I really wanted to put a picture of this up, but I couldn't find a good copyright for it, so I couldn't do this. But if you look at what looks like a solid table to you, is not solid. It is all kinds of pock marks and holes and cork. You know, I looked at a picture of cork in the electron microscope, and it is holes throughout, all over. It's not solid at all, but it appears to be solid to us. So what is, in fact, the essence of any given thing? It can be very, very difficult to identify what makes that substance what it is. Well, it's caused a lot of questions in the scientific community. And there are those people who are saying things like, now see, I just got behind myself here. Okay, just so you know, that's what we just did. Okay, so, but going through this idea, that if you watch Marvel, the Marvel universe, you know what I'm talking about? Like Spider-Man, and he one of them? Okay, Thor, all those guys. The Marvel universe is all about the multiverse. And I thought that's really cute. I mean, it's kind of fun to think of Doc Strange going through all these multiple universes and all that stuff. Scientists are talking about multiple universes now, saying that maybe we are in the middle of a universe that's part of other universes because it is so hard to know what is in fact true. And we're dealing in space and time signatures that are so far outside the common context. When I'm going to talk eventually, that's not funny. That was not a joke. But I'm going to talk eventually about how to prove the existence of God, for example. But when we think about things like that, it's mind-boggling, right? Or think about a God who stands outside of time. How's that possible? When we think in terms of, now this is not about tonight, but I'm just saying, I'm just throwing this out there. But, when I think of time, I think of an ongoing continuum, right? From the past to the future, right? How can a God sit outside of all time? Well, I think in terms of chronological sequence. God is outside the sequence. Well, how's that possible? I don't know. But the reality is what God knows as reality is the truth and not me. But trying to find how to understand truth, that becomes the thing. What Bertrand Russell came to conclude, having gone through these ideas, he asked two questions. He said, is there actually a table there? Number one. And what if it exists, is it? What is the truth about that table? So I'm just kind of playing with you a little bit, but I'm not actually, because this is true. This is true reality that we're trying to figure out. But the question, when asked on these levels, can actually talk about the ideas of what the universe might or might not be. And I thought about Romans 8:38 that says, "I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers," which can also be translated principalities, "nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." So, I mean, the idea is that this universe is made up of stuff that we cannot see. And what we have to do is to try to live within the context of our existence as it is and try to understand this life that we're in. And if I'm going to follow God, it's not necessary that I know everything about God in the sense of I can identify every trait of God and so forth, because faith is a part of that process. But in reality, God has given me a mind that I have the capacity to interact. And I gave you the verses at the beginning of this session saying that God wants me to know Him. And therefore, I have to have what knowledge means, yada. And that's an intimate interaction with God. So some of that is part of this. Well, all right, so let's talk about, I think the easier way for me to do this is put all of them on there. So here's how this note-taking works and gets messed up. I'm going to put all these on here. You're going to write them down while I'm talking, and you won't know what I said. I've been there. I know this. Okay? All right. Now, Plato and through the mouth of Socrates in many of his dialogues, Plato was trying to define various types of things, and knowledge was one of those things that Plato tried to describe. And his most famous example is found in his dialogue, The Republic, in which Socrates is defining everything in terms of the orders of existence and the realms. And so one of the things that Plato defines there, and he does this in Phaedo as well, Phaedo, which is a study of the soul, a dialogue on the soul. But at any rate, one of the things that Plato did was to try and express the reality of the spiritual realms that exist. In other words, he believed that there was more than this realm in existence, and that we oftentimes, and I'm going to explain this way in a second, but oftentimes we are looking at things and our understanding of this other realm impinges itself on us such that we're able to understand things by that realm. So, for example, he believed that in this spiritual realm there existed forms/ideas that are perfect representations of everything we consciously and unconsciously know in this realm. In other words, when I look at a flower and I say, that's a beautiful flower, that's kind of relative, right? I mean, Jordan right here might look at that rose. I look at a rose and Jordan looks at it and says, it's got stuff on it. It doesn't look right. But I'm saying it looks beautiful. Well, how do I know what beauty is? Well, there is an ideal that exists in the other realm that is the ideal of beauty. And because it participates in that, I can say that is beautiful. The same would be for a pig. In this other realm, there is a perfect ideal of what a pig is. And when I look at a pig, I just know that's not a Saint Bernard, because it matches the ideal that exists, the form that exists in that other realm. And the same thing would be true for the idea of justice or any other type ideal that you can think about. So that idea is the model of what we experience. And so what we are trying to do is to live into our lives in such a way that we express the greater good of that model or ideal or idea. Now, he also believed that our souls existed prior to birth. So there was kind of in Plato's understanding and Socrates' understanding, there is this kind of well of souls that exists. And so when you are born, a soul from that well comes down and enters your body. Now, it's very interesting that if you were hearing or you were here when we were talking about some of the early fathers, they talked about the fact that there is a moment when the soul enters the fetus of the baby. If you've ever thought about that, that's an interesting thought. When does that, think about that. Think about the fact that if you're making a case for against abortion, that you're using the case of the soul to say that the moment of fertilization, the moment that the fetus exists, the soul enters into that fetus, that embryo, and thus that is a living soul, a living human being. The argument is kind of built around that idea. But anyway, he believes that the souls existed prior to birth and that they know the forms or ideas perfectly while existing in this spirit world, the world of ideas. When they're born into this world, and this really kind of makes sense, the very trauma of being born is such that it makes them forget about their experience in this other realm. And so for Socrates, he believed that education is recollection. Now think about that. And if you've ever read any of the Socratic dialogues, you know what I'm talking about. Socrates would have a foil, somebody he's working with, And so he would ask pointed questions. And what's really funny, if you read Socrates and Plato, what's really funny is that he'll ask these questions, and they're like, it's not an argument going on. It's like the guy's just approving everything he says. And he'll say, this and this and this and this is true, right? Yes. And this and this and this is true, right? Yes. And therefore this and this and this is true, right? Yes. I mean, it's really, he's really just making his argument and letting the other guy kind of be his bounce off of, you know. So in this particular case, he's trying to express this idea that he takes a young boy and he brings him up in front of all these people that he's talking to, and he then begins a dialogue with this young boy, and pretty soon this kid is like maybe 5, and he goes through this whole series of questions, and he ends up doing a Pythagorean theorem through this child, and he says, see, he knew this all along. I just needed to bring it back to his attention. So recollection is the idea of knowledge according to Plato. Now, Plato gave an example of this in his dialogue called The Republic, and he said, picture it this way, and you know, you may not like these things, but I think they're interesting. So in this particular case, he said, imagine there are some people, and if you can think about the walls back there, that they have their backs to that wall in the back. Okay, y'all all look right there. See that wall? Okay. All right, they are chained to that wall facing this direction. Okay, and there's a wall here. Imagine a wall here. They are chained to that. On the other side of them, in the very, very back of the balcony or whatever that is, there is a huge bonfire, big bonfire. And there are these people walking between the bonfire and the bonfire and the wall where they're chained. And over on this wall, what happens? The shadow comes and hits the other wall, and so the person sitting there with their chains on are seeing shadows go across that wall. Now, to them, what is reality? This is interactive. The shadow is real to them. But it's not real. It's a shadow. And he said, what if, in fact, they are unchained and they're able to get up and they're able to turn around and see the actual objects? It would be a great surprise to them to see just how detailed and real those objects are. They would suddenly be able to see. And then he went on to say, and even if you think about this even further, what would happen if you took this person and took them outside the cave and let them be introduced to the sunshine? What would that sunshine feel like to them? It would be painful. And so the reality is, learning the truth about reality is very difficult, and it's very hard. And most of us are satisfied to live in the shadows rather than the realities of truth. And because of that, when someone begins to introduce us to the truth, it becomes very painful for us to receive. And we want to reject it because it doesn't match how we feel. The philosopher or teacher's job is to do that painful thing, to teach a person what the truth is about the other realm and the realities that are true, not those shadows that they've been living by. Now, even though Socrates was not a Christian, I am saying that there are many ways that you can take what he thought and you can apply it. There are lots of people in this world. We talked about this in my class on Sunday. There are lots of people in this world who base their whole world on material values only. And they live their life as if this world is all there is. And because that's the reality they live, one day they're going to find out that was a shadow of truth, not a reality. And it's going to be a very painful moment for them to realize they based all their efforts on something that was not real. That's why Jesus said, build the treasure in heaven. not on earth. You know, he's trying to say to us that the reality is not here. Okay, I played with that too much. But, all right, it reminded me of this verse that I thought was a very helpful verse here, that when we think about this reality that we live in, it kind of looks like 1 Corinthians 13. Now we see through a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Paul is saying that right now, many times we live into this world as if this is it, and we really are just seeing a dim representation of what it really is. That's one of the great things of Ecclesiastes. I like what the teacher says in Ecclesiastes is, he said, people build their lives on all this stuff, and they don't seem to realize that somebody else is going to get their stuff when they die. And they may just throw it away. Now, Sherry said that to me as a teacher with all my notes and stuff I kept for 30 years. Okay. I threw it away. All right, here's another case that in many ways, that when we think about this spiritual life that we're trying to understand more truly, one of the things that we see here is like in 2 Corinthians 4:4. In their case, those people who are kind of blinded by and living by shadows, they have got the world on their minds, and their world has been blinded in such a way that they don't truly see the truth. They see shadows rather. And the reason this is because the God of this world, who we tend to say is Satan, is helping them focus on what's not real and focus on that which does not have eternal value. So I'm just saying that this is the kind of interaction that God is doing through Paul and through Peter and James and John as they write these documents. They're trying to say that there's more to all of this than you're simply living into. And what we want to do is get behind the curtain. All right. Aristotle was kind of an empiricist, what we call an empiricist. Oh, you want all of it? Okay. He did not believe that souls existed in the pre-world. He believed they got a soul as they came into the world. And for him, learning comes through experience. Empiricism is about experience. And so what he says is that if you want to know what a pig is, you just look at a pig. If you want to know what beauty is in a rose, just look at a rose, and it defines itself as beautiful by the fact that it appears that way. So for them, it's more about how your senses react to any given thing than it is to the existence of something that's ideal and beyond this realm for us. So what we do is we begin the process. Now I'm going to talk about John Locke in a second, who kind of played off of Aristotle. But so if I really want to understand, again, if I want to understand, say, a Cocker Spaniel, what I would do is I would look at a lot of dogs, and I would see a defining thing that makes the Cocker Spaniel different from those other dogs, but he has the same characteristics of a dog. And as I utilize my empirical study of that, I will come to conclude the summation of all these parts makes this what I would call a Cocker Spaniel. See, it was really funny. I did that really well. Okay. Now, I want to talk about something else that I just kind of threw in here that maybe is helpful. Actually, I haven't even put this in my notes, so I'll just play off of it. When we come to try to define truth, sometimes what we want to do is we want to understand the difference between absolute truth, which is what we deal with in spiritual realm, and relative truth, which oftentimes people say is the way the world operates. So you get a lot of people who will say, truth is relative. It's to whatever perspective you believe it to be true, not the reality of a truth underneath. So what I want to do here is give you a couple of things that come out of this. I put these in today. A lot of people hold that the way to find truth real truth, is what's called correspondent theory of truth. That is, truth lies in the subject that you're looking at. Going back kind of to what we were already saying. Truth is that which corresponds to reality, or that which really exists. So truth is, when you define a table, truth is what that table really is. That's what truth is. Whatever corresponds closest to that, that is the truth. And this is kind of close to what Aristotle is saying, because he's talking about the fact it's not about the other world, it's about what's in that one thing that I'm looking at, and that will define the truth. Now, when we talk about absolutes, we oftentimes say that absolutes are self-evident truths. They cannot be denied because they are self-evident. Gravity, for example, is a self-evident truth. If I step off this stage, I'm going to fall. And, postmodernism would take the other so for example, a realist or a person who is an empiricist would say that the absolute is gravity. So I step off this stage, break my leg, maybe. Okay, next week I step off this stage and, do one of something to me. Okay, so I do that over and over again. So that's absolutely true. Postmodernist says, are you sure? Will it happen the next time? How can you be sure? Yeah. The empiricist says, because I've done it 4 or 5 times. The postmodernist says, what about the 6th, 7th, and 8th? So again, there's differences of ways that one approaches this. But absolute truth is also oftentimes called objective truth. And it's truth that exists and is true whether you believe it or not. So 2 + 3 = 5 is going to always be true. If you take 2, this is the way you did in kindergarten, right? You take 2 apples and you add 3 apples to those 2 apples, you get 5 apples. It's an absolute, it's an objective truth. And objective truths don't matter what you prefer. You might prefer to add 3 and 2 and equal 7. That's just not true. It doesn't correspond to reality. Okay? Now again, when we start talking about God, it's a different deal. But for Christians, the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, salvation by faith in Christ alone, etc., are all absolute truths that never change regardless of the preferences of people who don't like Christianity. They're absolutes. They're objective truths. And they just exist. And I would say, and I'm going to deal with relative truth when I talk about ethics and morality, which is who knows when. But I'll talk about relative truth. But I can tell you this, it's really hard to have a position of relative truth. Because the moment I say there are no absolutes, I've just created an absolute. The absolute is that there are no absolutes. Well, that goes against the law of non-contradiction. You cannot contradict yourself. And that's why you argue like the non-contradiction point. That's why you can argue. And to me, if I'm proving the existence of God, it seems really simple to me. Nothing from nothing equals nothing. Right? And if nothing existed, then nothing can be created. So either material things existed or a being existed that created material things. It's pretty simple to me. And I don't know how inanimate objects can create more inanimate objects. Non-animated by non-mental, non-conscious. So anyway, I'm just saying, to me, it's actually kind of simple that if you just start at the beginning and just say, how did it get here? If it was already there, then it's God. But if it was non-thinking matter, how did it make more matter? Okay, that's just my thought. All right, so I want to go, I'm still talking about knowledge. All right, so Descartes and Locke are two great thinkers that come out of this. So you get Descartes, and I just finished reading him again because I wanted to kind of get prepared for this. And Descartes is that guy who said, I'm going to doubt everything until I come to one reality that is true, and then I can start everything else coming back. So he began to say, maybe all my life, all these things that I've thought about, feelings I had, thoughts I did, touches, things I touched and so forth, maybe all these things, these perceptions that I've had all my life are false. Maybe they were even given to me by a false being that's evil. So I'm just going to simply doubt everything. And he starts doubting everything. He even doubts mathematics. He's a mathematician, but he starts doubting mathematical truths, right? Just going down the line, doubting everything. And he says he eventually came to one thing, that there is one thing that absolutely existed, and that was he is a thinking thing. He is thinking that he's thinking. And that's the bottom line. And he said, having established that, then I can begin from there to think in terms of what is in fact realities that are all around me. And so anyway, he went through that whole process, and he's the one that came with the cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Y'all have heard that before. Now, John Locke is also interested in knowledge, but he's not thinking in terms of what Descartes wanted to do was to create this process of doubt till he got to the bottom line and then work his way back to the ultimate truth, and that is God. So his desire was to prove the existence of God, and I'll talk about that when I talk about the existence of God. But John Locke, on the other hand, he also believed in God, but he was really just trying to define how do we know anything. And his way is the empirical way, and that is if you want to know you exist, then stick your finger in a fire. If you feel pain, which you will, unless you have leprosy, but which kills all nerves, but if you stick your finger in a fire, you'll feel pain, and therefore you'll know that you're a thinking thing at the least. Okay? And you'll also know that that appendage on you is part of your thinking thing. Okay. So he's the one that came up with tabula rasa. He believed that we were born into this world, and this is where you get a lot of we've had education issues at times with this idea, but one of the things that he came up with was tabula rasa. That is, every one of us is born a blank slate. We know nothing. Now, what he's really kind of getting at, this idea that if you're a Wesleyan, what you do believe in is prevenient grace, right? And prevenient grace is also based in the idea that John Wesley believed that prevenient grace is God's giving grace, though we didn't deserve it. And part of what he said, the prevenient grace is our conscience, that we enter into this world because of God's grace with a conscience that tells us right and wrong. Even in Romans 2, you get that idea where he says, those who don't even know the scriptures seem to understand truth as right and wrong. Okay? That there's something that's hardwired into us that is part of that process of God giving us pre-existing truth. Well, what he said was, and I'm going to stop in just a second. I'm not going to say just one more thing. But what he said was that I don't have anything. I don't know anything. I just come into it very blank. And every new experience that I have, and those of you with young babies would understand this, and if you've had a young baby 20 years ago, you understand it still. But the idea is that child, that baby, if you've ever looked at them, they're looking at their hand going, what the heck is that? And slap. Bill Cosby did some funny things with that back in the day. But the idea is that they are looking at these things and they're finding out that they grip. They find out all of these things are things they did not know until they experienced that reality as it came about. And so the process of learning for Locke is taking all these experiences and perceptions and then beginning to build into it what becomes your known character and your personality. Okay? So for him, these are not pre-existing conditions. They're all things that we come to know by experience, experiential knowledge. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to talk about multiple intelligences beginning of our next session in 3 weeks. And guess what? You still get to keep this outline because I'm not through yet. But I've gone a little bit more depth than I wanted to, but I began to add to it because I think the bottom line for us is God wants us to know him, right? And I think that it helps us to know that we can know things that are outside this realm that exist. And to know that we've been hardwired in such a way that we have the capacity to understand. And I think you'll find some very interesting things that I'm going to talk about next time that kind of are scientific data that has been discovered through experiment and that really are fascinating in terms of how there is a spiritual knowledge that we have that is just not explainable. In other words, unless it's God. Okay? All right, let me pray for us. Thank you, Lord, for our time together. Thank you that you do want us to know you and that you've made it possible by creating us specifically in such a way that we have the capacity to know truths that exist beyond this realm, to know things that exist that are not fairy tales or not things that we've dreamed up, but they are realities that exist in the realm that you exist in. And we pray that you will help us to come to know you as that God who is everywhere, but is also in us. We ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.